You can all hear me okay, right? So one of the things I absolutely love about Constantine's meetups that he organises is he lets me talk for as long as I want to. I've got about an hour and a half worth of material here, so I just want to run a quick check before I start. Are you all comfortable with me talking for an hour and a half in this lovely pub?
No.
Don't you dare!
A couple of hands. Okay, are you comfortable with the idea that we'll put a break in the middle? Hands up if you're comfortable with that. Hands up if you're still slightly uncomfortable about the fact that I have an hour and a half's worth of material. That's it. Okay, I'm going to put a break in the middle and then see how you guys feel. I will warn you that the last time I did this talk, they got me to talk straight through. Okay, but they weren't in a pub, so we'll see how it goes. So here's what I'm going to cover today. An introduction to TDD, the way I do it, which is of course BDD really, just at a unit level. I'm going to show you how to apply those patterns to people. And I've called it TDD all the things rather than BDD all the things because there's a pattern that we normally associate with TDD that isn't in BDD. And I'll talk a little bit about how to do that with BDD as well. I'll give you an introduction to Cynefin. Hands up if you're familiar with Cynefin. Hands up if you're not familiar with Cynefin. Hands up if you realised you were familiar with Cynefin when you saw how it was spelt. Okay. So those of you who are not familiar with Cynefin, it's the single biggest mindset tool I have come across in the last 5 years, at least, if not my life. It's astonishing. It's completely changed the way I look at the world. Then I'm going to show you how to refactor people and how to apply this stuff to your life. So people in large groups rather than just a person. And then I'll talk about how to do test-driven experiments where you're not sure what the outcome should look like and how to actually use scenarios in places of uncertainty. That last section, if it's running a bit late and you're looking a bit like you want out of here, I'll just skip to some slides that cover the real basics for you, okay? So I might really just skip that one and make it shorter. Okay, so an introduction to TDD. Anybody know what TDD's patterns are? You know the cycle of TDD? What does it look like? You've got some new behaviour you want. What do? First thing you do in TDD? Write a test. You write a failing test, right? That's what you do. You write a failing test. Okay. And when you've got your failing test, what do you do next? You make it pass. And then what you do? You refactor, right? That's the bit that was missing from BDD. We weren't doing refactoring, but well, we kind of were, but we weren't calling it refactoring. We weren't really thinking about it a lot. So I might have a bit of a conversation about that. What do we do after we've refactored? Write a failing test. Yay, there we go. That's it. That's TDD. That's my introduction to TDD. Let me show you an example, because I like examples. Here's an example. This is a piece of code that I wrote for an automation tool that runs in .NET. You can all read that at the back, right? No? Okay. I made it bigger for you. So here we go. I'm going to break it down. This class is called the waiter, and it's a thing which waits for automation events to happen and then returns control to the test. So it's got this method, it's got a couple of methods, but I've just picked on one. It says it should wait for events to occur. This is actually where BDD started. Right at the beginning, it was actually a replacement for JUnit back in the days when JUnit started with the word test at the beginning of every method. And down north it's like, yeah, everybody's getting confusing and they think it's about testing. And it really isn't. It's about understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve and just coming up with an example. And actually using the word should is really powerful because it allows you to question whether it should do that or not. So this is how I learned to do BDD at this level. This is how I started, with methods that started with the word this class should do this stuff. So it should wait for events to occur. That's why it's called a waiter. That's what it does. Okay. It says given an automation element. So I've got a little pet shop, and it opens the pet shop, and it goes and finds the automation element that's a combo box on the pet shop. Pretty simple. When we cause a slow event on that element, this is actually threaded. I'm running threaded tests here. Hands up if you're not a dev. Don't worry, we're going to move on to some other stuff in a moment. This is not very codey. So we're waiting for 200 milliseconds, then we're causing something to happen on the combo box. We're going to select, that's the ID, but it just says carnivorous in real life. So it's basically saying that my rabbit is carnivorous. Then we wait for the event. Okay, so it's this, you don't need to worry about too much, but it's saying wait for the combo box, and then there's some little bits of C# stuff that passes the combo box into the next bit that happens. When this thing happens, run this stuff in the brackets. So it's going to set event occurred to true. The event happened, yay. That's what we're hoping is going to happen. And return whether the thing is true or not. So return true, right? And then new timespan, blah, 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 blah. List automation. And now I've set event to true and return true because I know this is the only possible event that can possibly happen because we've run it in the code. But normally you would return and nothing would be happening in there apart from it would return true or false. So we're waiting for some time span. I turned it out of, I can't remember where I turned it out, how long, but it asserts fails, gets an error passed to it. You can see the exception gets passed, which isn't going to happen because we know it works. And this is the kind of event that it's waiting for. So that's just the API. And then we have the outcome we're looking for. The event should have occurred. Yay. Okay? And then because I'm a developer, we close the bracket. Okay, so that's how I do BDD. This is what it looks like when you just phrase it in English. Given an automation element, won't cause a slow event on that element, and we wait for the event, then we should be notified when the event occurs. And I do BDD at a class level just by writing this stuff in comments first, and then filling in the gaps. And it's pretty easy. And I don't think about it very hard. I just kind of do it. And people say TDD is hard. And I go, it's what now? It's just English. And then some code to make that work. When you think of it this way, I found it really is quite easy to do. This one of the reasons I was attracted to BDD at a system level, because it's just talking to people and going, can you give me an example of that? And then making that example pass. And before you know it, you've got working valuable software. And people say developing software is hard, and I never really understood that either. People are hard. People are hard. But never software. So in BDD, we've got this thing which is an example. We say, given a context, when an event happens, then an outcome should occur. Is there anyone who's new to BDD here? You're allowed. It's a BDD meetup. Okay, there's a few people. Okay, so I'm not going to go into BDD itself in too much detail, but I'm going to show you the patterns that we use for it. There's another pattern that we use at a class level, just to show you that this stuff is pervasive, and we think of it in different ways, and we have different names for the same pattern. Okay, arrange, act, assert. Hands up if you've heard of that. Right. So TDD frequently you arrange, you act, and you assert. So this is where we arrange stuff given a context. We set up a context given a combo box. Right. Here's the act, the thing we do, and here's where we assert and verify the outcome. It's the same pattern. We're just using different words for it. So we see this pattern all over the place. For those of you who are new to BDD, or who want to see how I do BDD, here's an example of an example, usual one I use. Given Probot a microwave costs £100. When he brings it back for a refund, then he should get £100. And we've all done something similar. We've all brought something back to a store for a refund and watched them scan our receipt and give us a refund and the like, right? I actually realised I haven't done that since they started automating tills. I haven't ever got a physical refund. I've done it on Amazon. I've got refunds from Amazon, but I've never brought anything back to a physical shop. But it was the same when I brought it back before they started scanning receipts, and you had to prove that you bought it and tell them that it was broken. They usually gave me a replacement rather than a refund. Okay, let's do this with Pixies. I like Pixies. You guys know what Pixie is? Sometimes I do this in Europe, and they've got different names for what they call a Pixie. The reason I use little Pixies is because I'm a dev. Hands up, devs. There are a lot of you here because you're all TDDers. When you give me half a problem as a dev, I'm already working on the whole solution in my head, right? and I'm so busy working on the solution, I stop paying attention to what the problem is. So the reason I use Pixies is it's like the Discworld novels. You've seen the Discworld novels, read them? Yeah, Two-Flower Tourist, he has a camera. And he takes a picture with the camera, and inside is this little imp, pixie-like creature that goes, sticks the picture out in front, and Two-Flower looks at it and goes, oh, that's a funny colour, and the pixie pops his head out and goes, yeah, sorry, I ran out of blue. Yeah, so that's how they take photos in the Discworld. You have to imagine that that's how software works. You have to imagine that's how anything works. There's pixies. There's pixies behind the screen, and they're not, it's not electronics, it's not pixels, it's somebody with very, very fast paintbrush. Yeah? And then you don't need to worry about the magic that's making that thing work. You just worry about what it is you want to see. And can you give the pixie a good example of that so he understands what it is that you're trying to achieve? Okay, so that's BDD, TDD with software. Same patterns. You can see how that's the same patterns, right, for BDD and TDD. Let's look at something which isn't TDD. I like playing Backgammon. The last time I asked this question, I had one person put their hand up and it made me feel very sad. Does anyone else here play Backgammon? Oh, I'm happier, thank you. If anybody wants a game, I'm always desperate to play Backgammon with real people because I thrash the computer, so it's not much fun anymore. The way you play Backgammon is like this. There's red and there's black on this one, and you start with U shapes. So the black guy's trying to come round in a U round here, and the red guy's trying to come round in a U round here. Okay? You can move your piece, you roll 2 dice, and you move your piece the number of pips on the dice. So if you've got a 5 and you're red, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Except you can't land on another person's piece if there are 2 of them or more. So you can't actually move this 1, 5 because of these guys. That's an example of something you can't do. You could move this 1, 5 and go join your guys over there. You can move this 1, 5, but it's not recommended because then you'll have one piece on its own. And if you move and take one piece on its own, it goes onto the bar. And then you have to come all the way back in at the beginning. So you roll a 5 and you come on here. Okay? If these guys, if there was only one black one here, and I rolled a 5, this one would go 5, take him, which would be a really cool thing to do because he's had to work this hard to get all the way around here. And then you put him on the bar and he'd have to come all the way back here again next go. Okay, so you can see some examples of how this works. And that's just me talking you through some examples. And I didn't use the word given or when or then. I just talked you through some examples of things you could do with this game. And you could use those examples to see whether people really understood the game or not. Okay, imagine I made this roll, what would you do? What could you do? What would be a good move to do? What would be a bad move to do? And this is how people teach people how to play games, usually with examples. If you remember playing chess, right, you learn how to do chess by reading books on strategy and seeing examples of their strategy in action. I've seen some examples, but I've never really understood it. You need the rules as well. So you need the behaviour, the description of the behaviour you're looking for, and some examples of it. Okay. That's boring. That's TDD, people. That's much more fun. Okay, let's start with a person. A person. What's the first thing you do in TDD? Sorry, you write a test. Okay, we're going to write a failing test. So we're going to tell them what they're doing wrong. No? Does that not work? Okay. The feedback cycle for changing the behaviour of people is like BDD. There's a context in which people are acting. Some stuff they know, some things that they've got in their context that are causing them to behave that way. Some stuff in their environment, so if they're devs, you know, they can't do this thing because they can't get a test server, whatever. There's an action they take within that context, and there's an outcome that you get from it. And if you're giving them feedback, it's because it's not the outcome you want. You're trying to change their behaviour. But we've just seen that giving them a failing test, saying that's not working, that's not what I want to see, I want to see this other thing, that doesn't work. It makes you feel bad, right? When somebody just turns around and goes, yeah, that's no good. This is because people have existing behaviour. They already have behaviour. We're not newcomers, we're not greenfield code bases, right? We've already got a ton of things that are valuable. So what do you do with a system that already has a ton of valuable behaviour in it? Anyone know?
Refactor first.
You refactor first. Okay, you take your existing jiggling behaviour.
It's not your fault.
It's me walking around, isn't it?
No, this is the background.
It's upstairs.
Right, can you guys still read that okay? It's bouncing a little bit. You take your existing behaviour and you refactor it. What do you have to do before you refactor it? If you take a class, what are you going to do with that class if you possibly can before you refactor it? You write some tests that anchor the existing behaviour. You anchor what you value that you don't want to change. Okay, and people are legacy code bases. We have behaviour that's valuable. We have things about ourselves that you want to keep. Things about each other that you want to keep. So the first thing you do is make sure that people understand what you value about them. You provide them with examples of things that you value about them. Okay, then what do? We write a failing test. Right, number one rule, anchor what you value. Number one rule of changing behaviour. Of anything is anchor what you value. Okay, so we write a failing test, new behaviour. How do you feel now? It's better, right, when you know that somebody values something you're doing and then they tell you, but they don't value this other thing. No? Still not brilliant? Okay, let's pretend we've got a solution to that. What do you do after you've told them what they're not doing right, what's failing?
How they can do it.
Get them to pass the test.
You get them to pass the test. What would be another way to describe failing without using the word failing?
Wrong.
Succeeding.
Not wrong? Succeed is a good one. I describe it as there's a thing I want. I mean, I'm the person who wants this stuff, right? So you don't need to say somebody's failing. What I'm looking for is describing the desired behaviour. That's what we're really doing. It's okay to call code failing. People don't have that association with code failing that they do with people failing. You don't want to be called a failure. What you're doing when you describe feedback is you're just describing the behaviour you want. Okay? It's just an example of something that I would love to see. You don't even have to say next time. You just say, I'm really looking forward to working with you in this new way. I'm really looking forward to seeing this stuff happening. I really value this about you, and I'm really looking forward to working with you in the future doing this other stuff. How are you feeling now?
Politically
Trust me, you get good at this stuff really quickly, and it's way more preferable to the failing test as well. So if you can phrase the outcome you're looking for, that's what you're really doing. You're just giving them some examples of things that they could be doing, outcomes they're looking for. Then what do? You make it pass, okay? Which for a person means change the behaviour. You help them change their behaviour so that they can, or you give them some suggestions for changing their behaviour so that they can actually make that work. And then we do it again. Okay, normally, a lot of people and a lot of managers who've been on feedback courses, they do this cycle the other way round. So they'll start here, and then they'll suggest the change in behaviour, and then they'll tell them what else they're looking forward to and describe very positively the things they're looking for. Anyone know what that's called? It's called the sandwich model. Right, the sandwich model of feedback. It's sometimes phrased as the shit sandwich, pardon the language, because most people get taught is to say something that's good about the person so they feel happy, and then tell them what's bad and what's failing, and then say something good about them because, you know, right? And then they'll be happy because you finished with something good. That's like me saying, you know, Constantine, thank you so much for setting up this lovely session. I'm glad you're not speaking because your talk sucks, but beer's great. What? That's not nice. Nor is it useful, nor is it friendly, nor is it true. But what you can do is this. This is how to do it right. You can anchor what you value about the person. And honestly, if that's all you do, if that's the only thing you feel comfortable doing, do that, because the rest of their behaviour will change. People are always experimenting, they're always trying new things, they're always trying to learn, they're always trying to be better. So if you can turn around to somebody and go, I love this thing you're doing, or just even thank you. That's a really good way to anchor what you value, just say thank you. Their behaviour will change. Really looking forward to this thing. Really want to work with you in this way. Can you help me get to this point? Those are all really positive ways to phrase. Another trick I learned from hypnotherapy, phrase these in the present tense. If you do mention unwanted behaviour, phrase it in the past tense. If you're trying to change yourselves, phrase it in the past tense. I ate an entire bucket of ice cream last week, right? It doesn't mean I eat buckets of ice cream and I shouldn't, right? That it's not true. You ate, you did that thing. You don't have to keep doing it. So we're now describing how we want people to behave in the future. And you can phrase it in the present tense. I'm really looking forward to us being there together where you've got this evening organised and I can talk to this many people and it would be fantastic. You know, I'm really looking forward to having a bigger venue with more seats for everyone. We didn't expect this many people. Thank you so much. Then you can suggest the behaviour. And here's the thing I found. You can make suggestions for how people change. And it's okay to do it in the middle, in between the two slices of the sandwich. But people can change themselves. We're not code. We're not inanimate computers. We actually have agency. It's enough to do the first two steps. People want to be passing tests. They want to be better people. They want to make other people happy. They want to have influence. Even sociopaths and psychopaths want to have influence. They want to do the things that are considered good and useful. It's enough to describe those first two. And they'll change themselves and complete the TDD cycle. How cool is that? Was that fun? Great. Introduction to Knevin. Oh. Now I can have some of the wine. The thing is, this stuff isn't certain. When you're dealing with code, it's repeatable. It does the same thing over and over again. You run the test 3 times, and unless you've got some time-related bug, it's usually, it's repeatable. The computer does what you tell it. In factories with cars coming out over and over and over and over again, things are repeatable and predictable. And I think a lot of people sometimes treat software development as if it should be that way. As if we should be able to analyse it and everything comes out okay. And it's not the way it works. It's not the way life works. It's not the way software works either. So I want to show you the Knevin framework because it's a really good way to think of what approaches you need for different kinds of problems and situations depending on how predictable they are. But to start with, I want to show you something that's probably a little bit more familiar to you so you can easily see that this stuff is true. What I'm saying is true, okay? So I'm going to show you how innovation happens. Hands up if you remember the first ever camera phones. Are there really people here who don't remember the first ever camera? Am I that old? Hands up if you remember the early camera phones. Nokia? Yeah, small people. Okay, that's reassuring. Back when camera phones were first developed, Kyocera produced one of the really early ones, and they made it point at the user because they thought people would use it for video calls. And they discovered that that wasn't the case, that the internet didn't really support that bandwidth, whatever, and that people wanted to make duck faces into it instead. And because of that discovery, Nokia took it. They did what's called spoiling the differentiator, and they popularised it. Hands up if you've got a camera on your phone now. Yeah. What else does a phone need to do if it's got a camera on it, as well as take photos? So nothing to do with pictures, nothing to do with the camera. What else does it need to do?
It's got to store them.
Sorry?
It's got to store them.
Nothing to do with the pictures, not storing them, forget it's got a camera on it. What else does it need to do?
Make calls.
Make calls, it's a phone. Yes, absolutely. So it needs to make calls, receive calls, do all the fun things that phones do. And we understand those scenarios really, really well. We're used to making calls, right? So they're what's called commoditized. And so the differentiator's now been spoiled to the extent that it's commoditized. And because it's commoditized, we've now made it stable, which means we've made it repeatable. We can now produce lots of phones with cameras on them, and it's not a big deal. We don't even think about it anymore. Hands up if you've got 2 cameras on your phone. One on the front and one on the back, right? Yeah, oh look, more hands go up now we think about it. Okay, so a lot of us now have 2 cameras on our phone. It's that easy to produce cameras on the phone now. And it's become so commoditized that now we can also, as well as making it repeatable, you can now build on that repeatability. So we get things like Instagram and people taking photos of their food and then complaining because it's cold. There was a brilliant, brilliant article some restaurateur wrote about why customer satisfaction was going down so sharply in restaurants, and he filmed the behaviour of about 120 different customers and compared it to security footage from the restaurants 50 years ago or whatever, and said, you know, that there's people were taking photos of their food and then literally sending it back. So you get side effects as a result of innovation as well. Okay, but this is the innovation cycle. We're all familiar with this cycle, right? This seems familiar to you guys? Yeah? You're okay with accepting this is true? All right, so let me show you Cynefin and how that relates. This stuff comes from Dave Snowden and his company Cognitive Edge. Cynthia Kurtz was involved in the initial stuff as well. Somebody apparently ran into somebody who said that I invented this. No, I didn't. There's a little 5-point scale that I invented, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is not something I invented. This is not my invention. This is just an awesome thing I found. The first kind of situation and problem that I want to look at is what we call obvious. It used to be named simple, they renamed it. So the idea of an obvious problem is, it's either something which a child can solve, you know, your chain falls off your bicycle, you can put it back on again, you know how to do that, you look at it and go, oh yeah, I can see what's happened. Or it's something where if you have expertise, the solution is obvious. So I was talking to my landlady of another pub, and she said, I said, you know, if the beer runs out, you know what to do. She said, yeah, I change barrel. I said, know how to do that. She's like, yeah. I've got no idea how to change a beer barrel, but she does. It's just an obvious thing, and it happens all the time. It's just one of those problems. And in this domain, we call them domains, not quadrants. There are 5 of them, and they're not straight-edged, and the borders are blurry, so please don't call them the keyword. In this domain, it's very predictable. The solution is predictable, it's repeatable. Those people here who like jigsaw puzzles, they're people who also like jigsaw puzzles? Are they the same people that like backgammon? Okay. As you get more and more complicated jigsaw puzzles, which children can't necessarily solve, what are some good strategies for that? You start at the edges, any others?
Colours together.
Colours, you pick colours, yeah. Any others? My family and I, if we do them at Christmas, we're always like, I'll do Santa Claus, you do the snowman, so you can pick particular characters, or if there's icons you recognise, stuff like that. So there's different ways of doing it. But it requires a bit of expertise. The solution is still predictable. There's still only one right outcome. there are many ways of reaching it. So you can think of a watchmaker. A watchmaker can take a watch apart, put it back together again. And we know what the watch is supposed to do. Okay? A car mechanic can fix your car. Brilliant. And you know if your car is fixed. And this is the place where analysis works really well. You get an expert in, the expert can analyse the problem and tell you what the solution ought to look like, and then you get to decide how you want to solve that problem. But there's another class of problems that defies analysis. A class of problems where you discover things and you have absolutely no way of predicting that that problem or that situation would result in that thing. So I want to give you my favourite example. There was a company called Ludical. Back in the day, they made this big multiplayer online game called Neverending. And they wanted more people to come and play this game, more players, more money. So they said, I know what we'll do. We'll set up this site where we can share screenshots of the game. And people will be able to upload beautiful screenshots, and then everyone else will see all these players are having fun, they're uploading these gorgeous screenshots, it's a really pretty game, and they'll come and play it. So they set up this site, and people duly started sharing the screenshots, and their holiday photos, and kittens, always kittens, and family pictures, and that became Flickr. That was how Flickr became. And you could never have predicted it. It's obvious in retrospect, but you couldn't have predicted it. The outcome has emerged. And the way to approach problems in this space is not to analyse it, it's to experiment with it. So BDD works really, really well in that complicated space where you've got experts and you're trying to understand their expertise and bring it into your team and get examples out of them. But if you try and do that when it's something new that you've never done before, something innovative, something where every question opens up another question, what happens in software is that we end up spending 3 hours in a room doing what's called analysis paralysis, and everybody's thrashing and everybody gets tired, and I can see a ton of you nodding. Okay, so if you run into that situation again, instead of going, okay, let's analyse this later, or worse, let's leave this and let the analysts do some more analysis, which never works and which pushes the risk to the end of the project. So this is where all the discovery happens. This is also where the risk is, because it's where the discovery happens. Rather than doing that, devs particularly, you get power here. You can say, maybe we can try something out, maybe we can knock up a prototype or a spike. Something that's an experiment, something that we can try that's cheap, and if it doesn't work, we'll understand more about the problem. And then, once you've done that, the scenarios start to fall out. And you can start seeing what you need to consider and what you don't. And if you're a nice lean startup, you get to ship it and learn from shipping something that really doesn't work at all, but nobody knows. Okay, if any of you are familiar with the Forward story, yeah, I'd share it for those people who don't know it, the birdcage one. I'll share it with anyone who wants to drink afterwards. I've got loads to talk about. So in the complex domain, we experiment, we try things out. And the reason we do this, if you're doing it right, is because we're trying to avoid this, which is chaos. And chaos is accident and emergency. Chaos is your house burning down. Cause and effect cannot be correlated until you're out of chaos and you get a chance to reflect. Okay, so you have to leave chaos for cause and effect to be correlated at all. Here, cause and effect correlation is obvious. Here it can be analysed. Here it's obvious in retrospect. And here there isn't any until you're out. And the trick in chaos is to act, and to act quickly. And it might not resolve itself in your favour. It will resolve itself, and it will resolve itself quickly, but it might not be in your favour. Ron Jeffries said to me, on a blog post, would you not want to do something safe to fail even in chaos? Like, well, if your house is burning down, you try and get out. You have no way of knowing if there's a fire on the stairs. You don't spend 5 minutes plotting alternative routes. You take the one which is shortest and most obvious and you know, has the fire signs on, and you get out the building. We actually had a fire alarm in a hotel at 3 in the morning. And everybody's like, oh. And I got out of the hotel because I know this stuff. And then I checked Twitter. But there were people in that hotel on Twitter from fire alarm. It's like, it was real fire. There really was a fire. It was only a little one, and it got put out, but there really was a fire, and people were like, oh, yeah. And the alarm's there for a reason. Get out the hotel, okay? Because if it starts taking fire, it takes fire really fast. Yves Harnou, one of the other Agile coaches, does a fantastic talk on what he learned from burning his parents' house down. They were very glad to see him when they got back from holiday. He has good parents. In the middle, we have the domain of disorder, and disorder is what happens when we don't know which of the domains dominates, and so we behave according to our preferred domain. And it usually ends up with us tipping into chaos. So examples of this might be project managers asking you to estimate accurately something you've never done before, for instance. I wrote a whole blog on disorder called How I Got a Black Eye, where I treated something as safe to fail and tried experimenting with it when actually it wasn't, and what I should have done was got the relevant expertise first. And actually it was available and I didn't look hard enough. I'll let you guys read that. At the bottom here, we have this little cliff, and that is because between the borders of obvious and chaotic, we have complacency. If you think things are simple and ticking along nicely and you're not worried about them, oops. And it's really hard to get that the other way. You normally have to throw constraints around the problem, make it safe to fail, etc. Okay? That's Cynefin. And you guys are going to go away and you're going to start seeing disorder. And you're going to start seeing the analysis paralysis and going, oh. And you'll start seeing things that you've never done before. And you'll go, oh, we should be running an experiment with this. And you'll start seeing expertise where people are going, okay, maybe we can just try something else. And you're like, but this other team have already done this. Can we not just ask one of them? And you will start approaching situations differently. And this is why this is my favourite tool that I've ever come across. Because it taught me how to look at the world in a different way. Please be gentle with your partners. Okay, I use this 5-point scale with it. This is something I created. 5, nobody in the world's done it before. 4, somebody out in the world's done it, but outside of our organisation, so probably a competitor. We're trying to spoil their differentiator. We still don't know what they discovered. 3, someone in the company has done it before, so we have the access to expertise. 2, someone in the team's done it before. 1, we all know how to do it. I like thinking about capabilities, so I think, well, what do we want to be able to do when this project goes live? And it's usually something that, well, it's always something the company hasn't been able to do before, at least in that context. So the context becomes the context in which you're doing that scenario. The capability becomes that thing we do, the when, and the outcome is the thing you're looking to try and achieve. Okay, so when you think, what will we be able to do once we've shipped this, you've already got your first scenario right there. So, this is why I call this capability red. Looking for the capabilities which are red, the ones we don't have already. They would be risky, do a prototype, do a spike, do an experiment. The orange ones, the ones where you want the expertise, and then the green ones, the ones, don't worry about it, your team is used to doing it. This is how they kind of fall on the Cynefin diagram. You'll notice I'm not worried about chaos. If you're in chaos, act. Get your experts, make them pair so they don't get it wrong. Do something, get out of that place. Throw constraints around the problem first. But the green stuff, don't worry about it, it's boring. We used to use login as an example for BDD, I'm so sorry. That was my fault. Please don't use login with BDD. It's boring, we know how login works, right? Unless you're producing some new paradigm for logging in and it's differentiating, then don't worry about it. Just use the library. Don't write scenarios around it. Okay. How are you feeling? We're coming up to 40 minutes. So I'm not going to talk for longer than now. That promise I will make. I'm hoping to finish this pretty quickly. Okay. So I want to show you how to refactor people and life. So your lives. I'm going to show you how to refactor this. This is the bit of BDD that we really didn't have before. When you refactor code, there's a thing that you start with in that complex space. You knock up the prototype. There's a little mantra that we have in Agile that says, make it, anyone know that one? Make it run. You make it run, then what do you do? Anyone know?
Make it right.
Make it right, and make it fast. Okay? Oh, you haven't seen this before, right? Now you understand it. You make it run, then you make it right, then you make it fast. Making it run basically means you get the thing that's new working. Just get it working. Just, try it out. Let's learn some more about it. Then what we do is we separate the concerns. This is the refactoring bit where we nicely allow the design to emerge. If you're doing this in BDD, this is about separating the capabilities. Make sure one feature file has one capabilities. If you've got scenarios that are trying to manage your till software and manage your stock management and everything else, then you can separate those. This is how you refactor scenarios. But you can also think about your organisation. What's the new capability? Make sure that goes in its own file, yeah? Because that's the one that's going to change. At least the features will change. So separate the concerns. And then we're going to make it fast so we can do more. That's why we want to make it fast. We want more people, more scale, more of that good thing that we're doing. So you can possibly see how this is starting to play into the idea that we might be able to do this with people. Okay, so if we do this with code, what does it look like? What does good code look like? There are some rules that we have with good code. We can focus on the responsibilities and strengths of good code, right? Single responsibility principle. Does one thing, does it really well. It's generous on input, strict on output. Have you guys heard that one before? Yeah. It's easy to understand and work with, nice clean APIs. They do does what it says on the tin. And you can trust clean code. That's what good code looks like. We're worried about people. Dan North has this lovely thing he calls the 3 ages. And this plays into this as well. So he says, first of all, you want to optimize for discovery. So we want to try something out and learn about it. That's what we do in this space. It's why we're writing the prototypes. It's why we're trying that new thing. Then we want to optimize for repeatability. So we want to make that new thing happen more often. And then we want to optimize for efficiency. So we want to make that thing as flawless and as fluent as possible. So we can do more. Anyone seen this book? Am I the only person who's looked at this book? Okay, this is an awesome book about how to, it's the same guy who wrote Crossing the Chasm, but it's about how to actually get a company's products launched off the ground. One of the things he says in it, he's got these 3 horizons that he talks about. And he says horizon 1 is the stuff that's really boring. And it's your bog standard making your money, you're just doing it day after day. Horizon 3 is your R&D. It's the stuff that's new, the stuff that's innovative, and the stuff that's fun. Horizon 2 is getting the stuff that's fun into that, it's now your bog standard day-to-day stuff. And one of the things he says was, Horizon 2 is loss leading. Horizon 3, you can all see the benefit of trying that prototype, of getting that stuff working, getting that new stuff happening. Horizon 1, you've got to do, because it's your day-to-day stuff, and it's making you money. But Horizon 2 fights for budget with Horizon 1. It fights for time, it fights for resources. Getting something new as part of what you do every day is hard because it fights with what you do every day. So to get this fun, new, high discovery stuff to the point where we can do it repeatedly, to the point where it's just a part of our lives, we have to recognise that this is a problem. Refactoring people looks like this. Make it run. Try it out. Get the new stuff the new thing you're enjoying. Try it out. If you enjoy it, great. Try it out some more. Once it's working and it becomes a thing that you're really good at, like for instance talking about BDD, you can make it a strength. You can make it something you do repeatedly. I started talking at conferences. My first ever conference session, I taught people how to write haiku. And then I did some more sessions talking, and then I was able to just go to conferences and get entry to conferences repeatedly. And now it's the point where they pay for my transport and accommodation and organise the hotels for me, and it's absolutely wonderful. So I've made it a part of my life, which means I can do more of it, because it's less effort for me to do and it's less cost for me to do. Okay? So this is the pattern. Try the new thing working, get this so that you've got your concerns separated, and then use others for the boring stuff. But Horizon 2 fights for budget with Horizon 1. Focusing on the things which you do, which are new, which are your niche capabilities, the things that you do that nobody else does or that very few other people does. It fights with your day-to-day life. So what you need to do is get your day-to-day life out of the way. Fortunately, somebody has already written a book about this. Did you know that somebody's already written a book about how to TDD your life? 4-Hour Work Week. Timothy Ferriss is exactly this. It's exactly this pattern. It is how to get your working day down to your working week down to 4 hours of work so that you've got more time for everything else. It's an awesome book. I highly recommend it. Strength Finder is really good. Any of the strength finding books are good as well. But the basic message is focus on the stuff you do really well and delegate the same way you get a class to delegate to another class. Delegate stuff to other people. Hire somebody to clean your house or get a ringer. Right? Hire an accountant to do those really boring accounts that you hate. I'm on the verge of getting somebody who can actually help me organise my life, because I don't like doing that very much either. So once you start getting really good, you start being able to earn money doing the things which make you special, which are usually higher paying, which then means you can delegate some other stuff. And he's got ways of, so many of the people I know are looking for the products which will allow them to just live off of those stuff that was a strength and is becoming repeatable. Books, training courses that they can license other people to do. All of these products, he's got some really great advice for how to become one of those entrepreneurs that you're so jealous of, that only works 4 hours a week and spends the rest of the time swanning around. He uses it to learn other languages. I use some of my time. I really like playing Skyrim, but I'm also writing a fantasy fiction novel. I get to do that stuff because I work part-time. So I'm not quite at 4 hours, but I definitely don't work as hard as I used to. So this is the book on how to TDD your life. So, good people. What do good people look like? I've shown you how you can actually become good people in the same way that good code. Right? This isn't a moral thing. This is just people will think you are good if you do these things. You focus on your responsibilities and strengths. You focus on the things you do differently compared to everybody else. You're generous in listening and honest in speaking. There's no point in making your life more complicated with deception. And if you're focusing on your strengths, you won't have to. You're easy to understand and work with, because people know what your strengths are and they have some expectations about what you can do, and they write to you and say, hey Liz, will you come to a conference? It's pretty cool. And you can trust good people. Horizon 2 fights for budget with Horizon 1. Focusing on strength fights for time with boring stuff. Get the boring stuff out the way. And then you will be able to trust people. And trust your code and trust people the same way. All right, let's have an intermission. I want you to leave here with an understanding of complexity and complexity thinking. An understanding that there are places where BDD in an analytical sense does not work, but where you can still use scenarios, you can still talk through examples. Hands up testers in the room? Right, these guys are really valuable for spotting scenarios you might not think of, and their input is still really valuable in complexity because they spot the failure cases. They can actually help you identify what you need to make safe to fail in those experiments. So what I want to do for the last little bit of this evening, there's a couple of things. One's called BDD for life. So I'm going to show you how to apply BDD in a lot more BDD patterns rather than TDD patterns. And then I'm going to show you how to use scenarios in experiment design. So I'm going to show you how to use scenarios when you can think of the outcomes, but you don't know what's actually going to happen. So we're talking about really uncertain spaces, and I've got a couple of examples of that as well. So I'm going to start with people process. So my mate Tobias Mayer gave me this example. He was trying to get his son to clean up his room. So what he said was, give my son's room as a mess. When I ask him to clean it up, then the room should be clean. Okay?
With a stress on the should.
With a stress on the should. So the reason we use should is because it allows you to question whether it really should or not, whether it should in all cases, what do we actually mean by this outcome. It's a lot easier to question should, to delete scenarios that no longer exist, than it is with words must or will. If you look right back on my blog, so I've been doing this 11 years, but if you look back about something like 8 years, you'll find I had a bit of an argument with Dan North over whether it should be must, will, or should, and was convinced that it was should. I actually stopped putting should in my scenarios and then brought it back a few years ago because I found people weren't questioning it, they were treating it like specifications, particularly if they've read Goyko's book. So there are 3 phases to BDD. You explore by example, then you understand and you can specify by example, and then you test by example, and it fits very well with that curve that I keep showing you. I'm not so worried about chaos. Act in chaos. Don't try to do BDD in chaos. Seriously, if your company has, for instance, like Night Trading did at the end of 2012, release something to production that's duplicating your trades, and you're only hedging half of them and the market spotted that, they lost $13 billion before they were able to switch off. They weren't doing BDD. I can guarantee that much. Okay? So we're talking about complex space stuff. We're talking about stuff where analysis doesn't work, it's not predictable, it's not boring enough to just name the scenarios and get on with it, which is what I suggest you do if you're into that boring stuff. But you do need some kind of specification. So testers in the room, that outcome, how comfortable do you feel with that? What would you want to apply to that if that was a software criteria? You want to apply SMART criteria, right? You want to do this thing, so make it specific and measurable and achievable and relevant and time-boxed. Is there anyone who hasn't come across that? Brilliant, I'm just skip that. The equivalent in life is ways of knowing that we've done something. And this is what we call, in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, well-formed outcomes. Now, neuro-linguistic programming has a hard press. Some of the stuff has been disproven. Some of the stuff does still work. Well-formed outcomes is one of the things that works really well. If you have a well-formed outcome, you can imagine a scenario in which that outcome happens. So a while back, I actually did a 10K race. I was a little bit fitter then than I am now. I trained properly for it. And the thing that kept me motivated, the outcome that I had in mind was that at the end of the race, I was going to go to a pub. You're seeing the connection now. But I was going to have had to run this race, and I was going to get this nice ice cold pint after the race. And I would have a sense of pride. So there's a kinesthetic sense that we sometimes get, a kinesthetic feeling. And we know what pride feels like to us. And you can imagine, think of something that you're trying to achieve that will make you feel that sense of pride if you try to achieve it. Just imagine what it's like standing there having achieved that thing right now. That sense of pride, yeah? Isn't that awesome? So once you imagine this outcome, now you've got an example of what it would feel like. Now, if I can't get a pint directly after the race, I'm not that worried. It's an example. It's not a test. It's just a scenario that's helping me be motivated, that's helping me think of things. It allows me to explore as well how realistic that example is. So one of the things that I asked was, okay, what does clean look like? How do you know clean? What's the well-formed version of clean? And Tobias said, well, I can see the carpet, there's no clothes on the floor, there's no toilet on the floor. Fantastic. He said, I look at it and I say, wow. I asked him if he had a kinesthetic sense. He said, look at it and say, wow. This is a much more powerful outcome, right? He's now defined what that really means. When we do coaching, or NLP, there's a thing that they use in coaching called the GROW framework. Anyone come across that? Yeah? Ian, because I've taught it to him. Or you probably came across it before me. Anyone else? A couple of people. It's a really simple framework. It says goal, reality, options, way forward. That's what it stands for, it's an acronym. So the goal is the thing you're aiming for. The reality is where you are right now. Your reality. The options are the resources available to you, routes forward that you could pick, and then you pick one to be your way forward. Okay? It's a basic coaching pattern, but you phrase the goal in terms of these well-formed outcomes. SMART criteria for life. There's your goal, your outcome you're looking for. There's your reality. Context in which you start, there's your options and the way forward that you pick. It's the same pattern. It's TDD, again. Right? Problem is, you only get one chance to do it. It's not like when you write code and you put it in the build and you go, oh no, I broke the build, I must wear the stupid I broke build hat. You only get one chance to do it and it changes the context. So it's really important that either you get it right or that it's safe to fail and that the worst that happens is you have to wear the silly life hat. Okay? This is where options come in. Chris Matz was the analyst who worked with Dan back in the early days, and he came up with this thing. He took the idea of options in finance, the right but not the obligation to do something, to buy something, to sell something. And he said, you can translate those into real life. It's really hard to price them, but there are some rules which work regardless. So here are the rules. Options have value. Having choices is a valuable thing, and this is because life is uncertain. You remember early on when I said, you know, how comfortable are you with me staying here for an hour and a half and talking? And you were like, and it's because that's a commitment. You can't leave if I'm talking. Those of you felt too uncomfortable even if you were standing at the back to order drinks, which I thought was a terrible shame. But we make commitments. We don't like not having choices, not having places to go. At some point our choices expire. If I've ordered tickets for a flight, do I have the option not to go on that flight? Of course I do. Yeah, absolutely. If I've gone through security, do I still have to go on that flight? No? But probably I won't get any refunds for my tickets, even the taxes. Because now, you know. If I'm on the flight, if I've actually got onto the plane, can I leave?
Yeah.
At what point can I not leave?
When they close the door.
They close the door, right? When they close the door, now let's imagine I throw a fit. And I become one of those angry, stroppy people that you read in the news about. Now can I get off the flight? Oh yeah, but there's a cost. In fact, you can get off the flight pretty much halfway through the journey, at which point you're going to be landing in the other airport or one that's on the other side of the channel, and there will be people waiting for you when you do. So, you know, at some point your options expire. But we think about, I've bought a ticket, I'm committed to that flight. People who think in a real options way, if they're not sure they're going to make a flight, and maybe it's really, really expensive to buy one of those fancy tickets that's completely refundable, because they're often like 4 times the price. But it's only twice the price to buy 2 of them for 2 different flights. And if you miss one, you get the taxes back on the one you miss, or the one you know you're going to miss. You get to pick one of them. We often make commitments in our heads. We think we've made commitments. When I agreed to do the 10k run, and I bought my ticket, which cost me £20 for the 10k run, was I committed? I really wasn't. It was a £20 option to do this 10k run. When I publicised it to my friends and asked them for sponsorship, now it's a commitment, right? And that's the useful way to use commitment, to motivate you to do something that you want to do anyway. I see people talk in terms of Scrum and say we're committing to this number of story points, these stories this sprint. And it includes stuff that's really highly uncertain. And you're killing your options early. And not communicating to the business, we're not sure about this. Not sure whether we're going to be able to deliver it or not. Most people would rather know you're not sure than have you make promises and then back out on them. So options do expire. Never commit early unless you know why. So I want to share one very quick story just to illustrate how real options thinkers are awesome. There's this ceremony they do at the Lean conference called Hokey Poke Awards. And every year they have a short list of 6 people and they choose 2 of them to be winners of this Hokey Poke Award. It's kind of like the PASC Award for the Agile Alliance, but it's the Lean conferences that do it. So they had this short list of 6 people, but the people who needed to vote on the winners were people like Don Reinertson, David Anderson, who runs conferences, Carl Scotland, all over the world, very busy, very expensive consultants. And they wanted them in the same room. They couldn't do this over Skype. It wasn't going to happen over Skype. They actually needed them in the same room. The first day that it was convenient to get them in the same room was the day before the conference. So that was the Monday. The conference started on Tuesday. The award ceremony was on the Thursday. And the lead time for getting the crystal trophies engraved with the winners' names was 4 weeks. So they got 6 trophies engraved. And then they met on the Monday and one by one eliminated people and binned 4 of them. And so it was hugely powerful to realise you just eliminated people and questioned whether that was the right thing to do. And yeah, that was what they did. There was a rumour that one of them was wandering around with a broken trophy and whispering to Chris Matt, "Do you want to see what an expired option looks like?" But that's real options thinking. Find the ways that make it cheap to fail, even if they cost a bit, because options have value. This is the book that Chris has written with Olaf Marson, who's also been heavily involved in this. Chris Geary is the artist. It is a graphic novel. It takes about 2 or 3 hours to read, still available in electronic form. If you want the hardback form, I think it's something like £300 on Amazon. Let me know, because I'll sell you one for £2.90. But there's an ebook version that you can get. It's really easy read. It's about a lady called Rose who's trying to save her project from being shut down, and it explains literal adoption and gives you some other examples. So BDD, we already said BDD works really well in that analysis space, the complicated space where things are predictable. But there's something that BDD does which isn't in the GROW framework. And it's a word that when I talk about BDD, I normally mention really early on, and I haven't mentioned yet. Anyone know what it is? Conversations. Absolutely, it's all about the conversations. Thank you very much. Who was it who said that? Yeah, fantastic. You can tell I spent far too long hanging around me on the project. There's a bit where we have the conversations. The reason we do that is because it allows us to discover stuff early. We've got this deliberate discovery phase in there, where we learn and we explore. And that was what was missing from the GROW framework. So here is a naive scenario for life. We've got an outcome, it's all good. We've got an event we're going to do to achieve that outcome, the 10K run. And then we've got reality, which is all good, right? So as long as we do that event, the outcome is predictable. Yeah, no, we already know that's not the case, because there's uncertainty in life. So, given that Tobias's son's room is in a mess, when we ask him to clean it up, the room should be clean. There's a thing that Tom Gilb does that's quite fun, which allows you to think about the failure scenarios much more cleanly. And one of the things he says is, okay, you can have your money or your life, but not both. That's what he calls a mafia offer. Right? Says, which one do you want? You can have the clean room, but your son's really miserable, he hates you. And it actually clarifies people's thinking. So the testers are really good at this. They're really good at picking up the other outcomes that are also important, that you also want to hang on to, the outcomes, the things you want to anchor. Remember, anchor the things that are valuable? He's really miserable and hates you. Oh no, that's not what you want. Okay, so let's look. We've got an unwanted outcome that's proceeding from a perfectly reasonable seeming event. I asked my son to clean his room. That's perfectly reasonable, right? So what kind of thing, what kind of context might we have that's leading to that unwanted outcome? What might be the case that would cause his son to do it but really hate it? This is how we get sub-goals. What we do is this. We look at the unwanted context. And what I said to Tobias was, does your son know what clean looks like? He went, well, I had to explain it to him the way I explained it to you. I said, do you think that would be useful? Possibly. So he's changing the context. I could not run 10K easily right now. 5K, I started running again. I'm up to about 5K. 10K would be hard. It would hurt. I would not be looking forward to the pint at the end. But I could change that context by just doing some more running, doing some more training, getting back into the shape I was in. So you can replace the context with one which is more favourable. And given that we have uncertainty, replacing the context where the event which leads to our well-formed outcome might give us more options, or the event which just leads to that replacement context. Find something that gives you a context which is better and more likely to allow you to succeed. You don't have to actually hit your goal head on. It's okay to take small steps, but this is how you take small steps. Find a context in which you're in a better position, in which you have more options. And then do the thing that leads you to that. So given my son's room is a mess, and he knows what clean looks like, that'll make me say, wow, that it will make me impressed with him, and he knows what that looks like. When I ask him to clean it up, then the room should be clean, and he should be happy. Very important outcome, right? I ran into Tobias a couple of months afterwards, and I said, oh, did you do that thing? How did it go? He said, it was awesome. He cleaned the room. So it worked. It worked really well. And this is what it looks like. Really simple. Find an event which leads to a replacement context. Don't worry about the rest. We'll get there when we get there. Things would have changed. Things would have moved on. Maybe you'll have learned something about the problem, or learned that you don't really actually value that thing. Give yourself some options. I want to give you an example, because we really like examples. This is an example from me. This is when I did the first BDD for Life talk, in which I introduced this pattern. These were the tests I had, and you can see they're in terms of well-formed outcomes. So I said, people at Agile understand BDD for life. And the tests were, they've got wide eyes, they're smiling, they're deep in thought or talking excitedly, they're mailing me afterwards, they're on Twitter, they're asking me questions. The unwanted context I had for this talk was that people thought BDD was a dev-centric thing. This was 2010. People think BDD is about tools. People were tired, it was just after lunch, literally just after a very big carb-tastic lunch. And people were sceptical about anything that looked vaguely like life coaching at the time. So I needed to replace those contexts. Okay, let's explain to them BDD is an analysis technique. It's not just about devs, it's about understanding problems. People are energized. I made them do a stupid stand-up, sit-down game. We can do it now if you like. Stand up if you have trouble achieving your goals. Few people, okay, sit down. Stand up if you have trouble understanding what your goals are in the first place. Oh, look, see, and it's what happened up there as well. We had, 90% of the room stood up for the second one. People don't understand what their goals are, but now you have a mechanism for thinking through your goals and thinking, is that something I really want? Can I think of a scenario where I actually achieve that goal? Who's in the room? Am I inside, outside? Who's around me? What sounds can I hear? What do I feel inside? Am I sitting at a computer terminal when I get that email? How does that email make me feel? Am I walking outside when I suddenly realise, oh my goodness, I made it? Whatever you imagine as your outcome, it can be hugely motivational, hugely. Positive visualisation doesn't always work, which is why we do this. Ran a quick intro to BDD and feature injection, which has now morphed into a thing I'm calling Capability Red. Ran the silly energising game. And I said, this is the first time I've done this talk. It's okay. I didn't just get people mailing me. I got a 2-page letter from an anonymous source about how he'd had depression all his life and I'd given him hope. I had another coach come up who is far older and more experienced than I was, or at least far more experienced, saying, I've got this situation and can you help me, or trying to understand it. I was overwhelmed. People thought I was some kind of life expert because of this. It really was me just applying the patterns to life. So this is the first type of talk like this I ever did. And goodness knows I got lots of questions. All right, how are you feeling now? Good. All right. I'm going to try and make this last for just long enough that you've got beer, and then we can go get some more beer. This is still the same glass of wine I started with, so I'm being restrained. Okay. This is one of the more recent things I've been looking at, how to actually use the scenarios to create experiments. And I actually asked Dave Snowden for feedback on the first blog post I did on this, so he's the guy who came up with Knevin. And he said, yes, and you want to use SenseMaker, which is the tool that Cognitive Edge produce, to gather up all the scenarios, because that would be really cool. SenseMaker was, when I started looking at this, about £80,000 for a license. That is now dropping dramatically to about 1,000 or 2,000. It is now accessible. I am looking at creating some surveys for SenseMaker which gather stories, and then the idea is that you actually mark on these little triads stuff about the stories. So they did one for Singapore, and they were looking, tell me a story about Singapore and your life in Singapore. And then they had a little triad, and it said, what's your story about, past, present, or the future? And you move a counter on this triad, depending on whether it's closer to a story about past and present or the future. And what they found was nobody was talking about the future, or saving for pensions, or, you know, making sure they had somebody to look after them. So they were looking at how society was, and they found this massive hole, and they were able to address it as a result with experiments, because that's what Dave Snowden does. So I'm very, very excited about the fact that SenseMaker is way more accessible. I don't often go on about tools. I don't even go on about JBehave or how awesome JBehave is, because it's just a tool. SenseMaker really is a little bit groundbreaking, so please excuse me talking about that. They're using it for all kinds of stuff, and the fact that it's down to about 1,000 or 2,000 means you can do stuff with it. They've got a 360 feedback, which gathers stories from people about you, and that's $150. So the first big project I'm on, I'm going to be using that. That's powerful. Okay, so Knevin. We remember Knevin. You remember I said you categorize things in the obvious domain, the simple obvious domain. Right, so it's one of those problems. So you sense, you categorize, and then you go, okay, I know how to fix that. In this complicated domain, you sense, analyze, and respond. Analysis works. The problem is, if you start sensing things in the complex domain, you will start seeing patterns. We're very, very good as human beings at thinking we understand cause and effect. They did some psychology experiments with this. Actually had people turn on and off switches and see if they could work out what the pattern was between turning the switches on and off and the lights. And people were coming up with all kinds of patterns and trying to understand the rules of how these switches were affecting these lights. It was random. There were no patterns, but these people swore they understood the patterns. Oh, I think I get it now, yeah. Because we use the same patterns, we're not used to thinking that seems really random. My favourite example of this is a place on Mars called Cydonia. There's a hill there. First time they flew over it, it looked like a face. That's a particular form of pattern matching that we call pareidolia. We see faces in things. We see things which are familiar to us. We see patterns in things which are familiar to us, even in unfamiliar environments and unfamiliar scenarios. It doesn't actually look like a face when you fly over it round the side of it, or you've got a more detailed resolution picture at all. It was just happenstance. So in the complex domain, what we have to do is not sense too much. We have to probe. We have to assume that cause and effect cannot be correlated and avoid coming up with hypotheses. That's really hard to do. I think this is broken because of this, right? How do you go, I can understand this is broken and I'm going to do these experiments, or I can see the situation, I want to do this experiment, without thinking, and I think this will be the outcome. It's hard to do. Just to complete it, in chaos we act, and then we sense and then respond. Because again, you don't want to spend a lot of time looking to see what's going on. In chaos, you want to get out of the burning house. Okay? Whenever we do anything new, we will make discoveries. You remember me saying this a lot? What do we do in complexity rather than analysing?
Trying to simplify.
Sorry?
Trying to simplify.
Trying to simplify. We try things out, definitely. We try to understand things. So we're trying things out. Okay? Probe is the word that the complexity thinkers use for that. Experiment is another word for it, but it has to be an experiment that is safe to fail. Okay? So here is how you use scenarios, or how you identify what kind of scenarios to use in this space. A thing that goes really nicely hand in hand with real options that I introduced earlier is deliberate discovery. It's kind of like when you can't open options up, getting the information early. So Dan North came up with this one, same guy who created BDD. He said deliberate discovery has 3 rules. One day I'm going to see a method that has 2 rules or 4 rules, but 3 rules seems to really fit, so they've all got 3 rules. Assume ignorance. You don't know. There's stuff you don't know. Yeah? Assume second order ignorance. There's stuff you don't know you don't know. All those risk matrices, yeah, seen project managers produce social risk matrix. They're all first order ignorance. They're not second order ignorance. You can't identify risks that you don't know are there. And optimize for discovery. It's in the new stuff. All the stuff you want to discover is mostly in the new stuff. Real options. Options have value, options expire, never commit early unless you know why. Sorry, I've obviously left 2 lots of those in there. But the most flawed commitments we make are the ones in our head. We think we understand things. We go ahead and we do these scenarios, we perform these scenarios in our lives thinking that they're going to result in predictable outcomes. And we make these assumptions in our heads that it's going to be the case. We make commitments all the time. Even I still make commitments even knowing this stuff. It's part of having cognitive bias. But you can do it less if you know, hold on, this is new. This thing I'm doing is new. I should probably do an experiment. I should probably create a safe to fail probe. So I want to show you the rules for creating those safe to fail probes. A safe to fail probe has a way of knowing it's succeeding. Yay! That's good. We like that. You might not know what the outcome is, but you can recognise a good outcome. Way of knowing it's failing. If it's succeeding, you want to do more of it. If it's failing, you want to do less. So you need a way of dampening it and a way of amplifying it. And then, and this is the real lovely thing I love about scenarios, you need a thing they call coherence. Coherence is like a good outcome. But since you don't know what the outcome is, it just means a realistic reason for thinking that this experiment might succeed. Can you think of a scenario where this experiment succeeds? What do you imagine happening? So, there you go, I'm skipping slides. I have done this talk before. So here's an example. This is a successful scenario. Given my client has a problem, when I suggest a practice that will help, they'll be able to deliver software. Should be able to deliver software, right? That's what I want for my clients. I want them to be able to deliver software. Let's look at another one. This is a much more software on the ground related one for those of you who are devs. Given friends signed up for Appytastic, when we sync to Facebook by default, then friends should see how awesome Appytastic is. I made up the word Appytastic. It's not a real thing. Okay? It's really nice if we can think of more than one scenario for success. We're not hung up on the one hypothesis. There's other ways in which this could work. French realising that Appytastic is a really easy way to get content onto Facebook because Facebook's API sucks or Facebook's UI sucks. That would be awesome. That's kind of like the adaptation thing, the exaptation thing that we saw with Ludicore and Flickr. Using something not for what it was intended to, but for something weird. So if you can think of some weird outcome that might happen, you know, it doesn't have to happen, it just might happen, then you know you might actually have a really good experiment there. You might get some outcomes which are positive that you haven't thought of. Because one of them, which seems outlandish, it could happen. It's really fun if you can get scenarios which are still successful but conflict. You cannot have both of them. And then you know you are really not hung up on one hypothesis. You have multiple options for the hypothesis. So help them think of different practices that are really helpful. Right? They learn from me suggesting practices. But we also need to consider the failure scenarios. So if my client has a problem and a context that I don't know about, which is usually likely because I haven't been there for long, when I suggest something that will help them, what might happen?
It helps them.
We're looking at failure scenarios. Makes things worse, yeah, they think I'm an idiot, makes things worse. That's not good. That's really not good. What about happy-tastic? We sync to Facebook by default. So Fred signs up for our lovely service that's not related to Facebook, and we have a little flag somewhere on the bottom of the page that says sync to Facebook by default. And there he is, uploading his beautiful photos of his stamp collection. His videos where he talks about the amazing stamps he has. And he puts the video online, and bang, it syncs to Facebook by default. So what's going to happen as a result?
His friends will disown him.
Yeah, people are going to think our app has privacy issues, right? Because I didn't want that. You've revealed the fact that I'm a stamp collector to all my friends. I actually met a stamp collector on a plane once. It was actually way more fascinating than I expected, but he wasn't boasting about it. So we have our way of knowing that it's succeeding. The client delivers software, Fred's friends see how awesome it is. We've got conflicting scenarios, so we know we're not hung up on any of these. We've got multiple ideas about how this thing might succeed. We can look at success metrics. So rather than just saying, we deliver software, you can go, well, okay, how quickly are they delivering software? Twice as fast as they used to be? This is another of Tom Gill's things. He's really, really good at picking up those targets, picking up those numbers. What would be an acceptable speed for delivering, say, Hello World, or a small bug fix that's just a piece of text? It doesn't really need testing, it just needs looking at and saying, yep, that's good. It takes you 2 months to do that now, and I've worked with clients for whom it took 2 months to ship a text change. Okay, so what would good look like? What would acceptable look like? Sign-up rate increases. How much does it increase by? What's your current sign-up rate? Play guitar. I want to play guitar. I'm learning how to play guitar. What does play guitar sound like? Can you think of an example of a song that you want to play? Anyone learning guitar here? A couple of people. Anyone know how to play guitar? More people. Sometimes both. There's a lovely game called Rocksmith that I'm playing, which teaches it's like Guitar Hero, but with a real guitar. It's really good. So that's what I'm learning with. And it's got loads of examples of songs, and there's some songs I really want to play, and it's very motivating. And there's more than one of them. Multiple hypotheses. Okay, so you also need a way of knowing it's failing. My client thinks I'm an idiot. Yeah, I'm going to know if he thinks I'm an idiot, he'll tell me. You'll know if somebody reckons there are privacy issues on a new app. The media will tell you. But you can measure those. You get what you measure, so you're measuring it. Try and measure the opposite, the successful metrics. You know, sign-up rate decreases, portion of positive tweets decreases. You want sign-up rate, you want positive tweets. Those should be things you're measuring. So you can think about, actually that would be a good thing to measure anyway, so it goes up, we know we're doing something right. That's another hypothesis. That's good. Okay? So measure smiles rather than frowning faces. I always go past, you ever seen those things in the airport outside the toilets which say, you know, how the toilet's happy? I'm like, I think there's a lot of people who go past those and just don't bother, unless they're feeling bad about it, and then they'll always hit the sad face. They must get so many sad faces because they've allowed people to have the sad face, and people notice when things go wrong. So if you can measure the positive opposite of the negative things, that's always really useful. Okay, whenever I do this, people always, when I suggest, you know, run experiments, and they come up with the scenarios, they come up with the ideas of things they want to try, and then this happens. What if? What if, oops, we've moved it onto a Mac, sorry, it says, what if a third-party system doesn't work that way? What if I move it onto a Mac and some of my fonts aren't loaded and they disappear? What if the release has a bug in it? Ah! That says, what if our people don't have the right skills? That's really weird. That looks okay on there.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, it looks okay on the next slide. What if someone gives away the admin password? What if AWS fails? What if a meteor hits our data center? I've had that. Okay? Not a meteor hitting the data center, but people worrying about a meteor hitting the data center. So they consider these failure scenarios, and one of the things they keep doing is they try and analyze their way out of them. Okay, well, we need to avoid that failure. We need to work out how to make sure that failure doesn't happen. We need to stop the meteor hitting our data center. Cue Bruce Willis. Right. The thing is, a safe-to-fail probe has a way of knowing it's succeeding, a way of knowing it's failing, a way of dampening it, a way of amplifying it, coherence, which means some scenarios you can think of that are good, and a way of avoiding failure completely. No, because then it wouldn't be an experiment. Don't try and avoid failure. Instead, make it safe to fail. Success is only guaranteed when you've done it before and you know it can be done in the same context, with the same requirements, and the same people who haven't changed at all, and the same technology, which also hasn't released any new versions, and the same market, which also hasn't changed, which means you own a time machine. If anyone owns a time machine, I really want to talk to you. You can have one of my business cards, no problem, okay? Also, go look up the story Everybody Tries to Kill Hitler, because it's really good. Right. So instead of that, make it safe to fail. Worry about how to make it safe to fail, not how to avoid the failure. But just, okay, if that happened, how can we actually mitigate that impact? I remember I brought down the Guardian's travel site for 3 hours when we released once. I panicked so much, it's awful. Nowadays they've got rollback. Somebody does something which brings down the travel site, people don't even notice. It's rolled out to 5% of the readers or something, you know, really small. It doesn't affect their advertising revenue. They see the page being reloaded a lot, they're, oh sugar, okay, let's roll back that release. So by introducing rollback, they made it safe to fail, and you can introduce similar things in your life. So given my client has a problem in the context I don't know about, what I tend to do is tell them it's a way of getting context quickly. I say, I make these suggestions because I don't know your context. If you don't think the suggestion is going to work, please share that context that I'm missing with me. And I tell them this up front. And it's fantastic because I get to make suggestions and they go, oh yeah, that's not going to work because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. And suddenly I'm getting all this context about why they haven't been able to adopt Agile, or they haven't been able to adopt BDD. And it's really fast. And it's safe, because they believe that I want it. So, Fred signed up for Appytastic, and we sync to Facebook by default. If you've ever released anything to Apple's store, Apple Store, anyone done that? How long does it take?
2 weeks.
Weeks, right? 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks of people going. So yeah, don't put it on your client, put it on the server. Put that flag on the server because you're not sure whether it's going to work or not, and now you can change it really easily. Make it safe to fail, make it cheap to change. Remember the estimating complexity stuff? This little 5-point scale? Remember how it falls on the Cynefin diagram? This is how you know which scenarios you're dealing with. If you've got an unfamiliar scenario, you are in this complex space. Think of some other scenarios that might happen as well. If you're here, ask the experts. They will be familiar with the scenarios. If you're down here, oh, I missed one. Oh, there we go. Familiar scenarios. And disaster movies. We don't like disaster movies. Well, I love disaster movies. I think they're fantastic. They make me feel so much better about everything else I'm doing. Hands up if you like disaster movies. Yeah, look at that. We love them. 2012 is one of my favourite films. It's got a car chase sequence where he's being chased by an earthquake. Unbelievable scenario, but there you go, it's fun, because it's unbelievable. Okay, context questioning. Remember I said earlier, think about context in which will that always happen? This is what allows you to look at your failure modes. Is there a context which for some event will give us a different outcome? Okay? Is there a context which for some event will give us outcomes that are cheaper to change? Will give us options? Will make it safe? That's what you need to be asking in uncertainty. I put this in here because I always forget about this one. When you open up options, be really careful. I once got a little letter from Google. They wanted to just chat, just chat. I was working with ThoughtWorks at the time, and I laughed because I didn't really want to leave, and I definitely didn't want to go to Google, but we thought about, if I turned up in a suit one day and then disappeared off for the afternoon, do you think that's me opening up options, or do you think that's me signalling intent? You turn up in a suit and then disappear off for the afternoon when, everybody else in the office is casual. They think you're looking to leave, right? I'm just looking to chat to somebody and dressing up smartly. So be really careful when you open up these options that people don't think you're going to take that option, because then it becomes a commitment when you didn't mean it to be. One of the things that I found really useful is to explicitly communicate. This is an experiment. We are trying it out. If it doesn't work, we'll stop doing it. And being really explicit. It's very important. Any other Agile coaches in the room? Am I the only Agile coach? Well, Constantine, yeah. Yeah, he was. So you can be explicit about things like I'm no good at organising conferences, or talks. So goodness knows how Constantine's done this, but we didn't expect this number of people to turn up. Imagine if we had said there may not be seats for everybody, so come early. Right? At least you're being transparent about it. And it's safer to fail, and people know what to expect. Shall I dive into chaos? We're very, very close to the end right now. If you want to get ideas about different scenarios, about possible hypotheses, possible outcomes from people, something you can do is to separate them. So make them act on their own. We're very, very good at coming to consensus when we come together. And it can lead us to think that there's only one scenario, only one possible outcome. So I was talking to some people in a training course about this, a remote training course, and I was on WebEx, and I said to them, okay, think of one way that people come to consensus, put it in the chat window. And the first person came back, said voting, and the second person said polling, and the third person said, yeah, I'll go with polling as well. I giggled and then had to explain why. And this is what we do. We go along with whoever's already gone before, we go along with the biggest voice, and we want to be part of a group, we want to come to consensus. So as soon as somebody has thought of a scenario, it's then really difficult to think of other scenarios. So if you can get people to separate when they're coming up with scenarios, you will get better data for the experiments, you'll get better failure scenarios, better ideas for what you need to consider. Okay? So, scenarios. This is the last slide. This is everything that I've talked about today. And thank you so much for hanging out for all this time. I really appreciate it, especially given this bar. Anchor the behaviour you value. Remember that. You've got to anchor the scenarios that you want to continue having. In unfamiliar scenarios, create options, make it safe to fail. Change code, but let people change themselves. You can show them where the safe to fail stuff is, you can show them where the failure modes are, let them change themselves. It's way more powerful than you changing things for them. Some experiments should fail. If you're only doing the safe stuff, you will never have that Horizon 3. You will never have the fun stuff in your life. Go have fun stuff in your life. Thank you.